Hi, my name is Consolate and welcome to another episode and another conversation with Consolate. I am honored that you get to show up to have and listen and engage with us through this conversation. Today's episode, we are going to be diving into the heart of who we are as people and as leaders. Areas such as inner resilience, growth, and also purpose-driven healing. I have been very inspired and challenged by this guest speaker who I am going to be speaking to around the norm of leadership, encouraging us from perfection level, performance, but making sure that we are coming from a genuine heart. We are intentional when we lead, and also in the area of healing. This conversation is powerful. I've been very excited to speak to this lady for a very long time, which reminds us that leadership starts within. When we lead, we grow. When we grow, we make space for other people to also do the same. My guest today is a person who embodies all that. She is a leadership coach, a workplace strategist, a founder of a brand called Promoter, which I am a big fan of. Honestly, it's been one of those discussions that embodies a lot of the things that she already do with her business and who she is as a person. Her brand is around the movement of helping organizations and leaders to lead beautifully with humane and also purpose, and making sure that we are coming from a genuine heart. So for me today, I'm going to ask you to take a big breath in, and I would like you to also invite you in to have this conversation and be inspired by Renée Shea. Renée, thank you so much for having this conversation with me. The conversation that is around speaking inner resilient growth and purpose-driven healing. Yeah. That's where the conversation is going today. Exactly. So I'm really excited to have you here. But before we go anywhere, what are you drinking?
What am I drinking? I am drinking coffee.
Which one?
All the time.
It's always coffee.
To be fair, I am having a lot of herbal teas lately that I'm enjoying making myself. But it's always coffee before midday, all the time.
Love it. What? Because we're talking about leadership. How can you describe your three leadership style?
Yeah, there's so many different theories and approaches to leadership, and I'm sure we're going to talk about this as we go.
Yeah.
For me, it's love. It has to be about who you are and driven from inside. And so my leadership style is very compassionate, it's very human-centered, and it's very impact-focused. Oh. More than one word each, but core to it.
Okay, and that's how you pretty much...
How I try and do everything.
Yeah. I love that. What are some of the things that are currently making you happy at the moment?
It goes back to what you were saying before about what am I drinking?
Yeah.
About 12 or so months ago, I started really looking in and playing with different herbal teas. So our kitchen at the moment is just filled with jars of all sorts of different herbs, and we get up in the morning and we have a think about what we want to feel like in the day.
Yeah.
It's like a little grounding intention setting process, and drawing on all of these herbs that we've collected over time to make a tea that helps us feel that way. That has been so much fun. Such an unexpected choice.
So you have, I can just imagine jars and jars
it really
of
is.
like
It really is.
different teas that it's just there. Do you know what you have at least?
My kids tease me about being a witch.
Wow.
But it really is lined up there with all of these jars of all sorts of different herbs.
Yeah.
And we just blend them ourselves rather than
it.
necessarily buy ones. And so that's been a real joy,
Yeah.
and completely unrelated to work and anything else.
And it just brings you joy. I
Yeah.
do love tea, I
Yeah.
must say. But I will always have a coffee.
Oh, yeah.
A coffee and then a tea is an addition. It's
Yeah.
like icing on the cake.
Exactly. It has to start with the coffee.
Okay, so today's conversation is looking through the brand that you have created or that you have founded.
Yep.
Yes. Promote her.
Yep.
Which I've been told that it's changing. So by the time this video does come out, most likely the name would have changed, and I'm sure you're gonna reveal it here
it's
today. What inspired you to start Promote Her as a brand that it is today?
Yeah, so my background for a long time was, and to cut a long career into very brief snippets, I spent a long time working in human resources in companies, and then I decided that I really wanted, and I got very burnt out in that corporate world and in that corporate environment, and then had that moment where I've got to do something different, and I started using photography. I used photography, and I was a photographer for quite some time.
Yeah.
And that was a really great creative outlet, and through that work I started working with all of these really remarkable women who were building businesses and brands, and who were using photography as a way to promote themselves online, create websites, all of the things that you use photos for.
Yeah.
But one of the things that consistently kept coming back to me through the conversations I was having with these women was just how really uncomfortable we were promoting ourselves. Talking about what we're good at, talking about what we believe in, what we're trying to achieve, and then how we were skilled at what we were doing. And so it became really clear to me that this fundamental skill set about promoting ourselves was something that a lot of women had a lot of trouble with. And then when I looked at that through the lens of being in HR and building your career and supporting people to get jobs and all the rest of it, it became really clear that this is a big gap for a lot of women, not just in building a business, but in their career as well, not being able to fully feel comfortable talking about themselves. And so that's where Promote Her started. It was really about helping folks build self-promotion skills.
So the women that you would meet, they would be from your work, with them creating a business outside of where they are currently, the organization that they're working on?
Could have been anywhere.
Yeah.
Could have been anywhere. I had folks that had been in business for a period of time, and they were like, I need to be bigger, I need to get myself out there more. Those who've been, there's lots of folks who would have a social media site, for example, like Instagram, and be maybe, say if they had a product business, sharing heaps of photos of their product, but not themselves, all of that kind of stuff. Or it could be women who were like, I need to get a new photo for my LinkedIn profile because I want to get a new job. So all sorts of different ways that this kind of issue would show up.
Yeah, and I'm guessing that would have led you to be the type of coach that you are today.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Can you speak a little bit more your journey that you've gone through and how it's shaped the leader or the coach that you are?
Yeah, and when I think about it, it has been a really twisty, windy journey, and I don't know if anyone's story of growth is ever linear. I've spoken about this a few times in different places.
Yeah.
I started my personal branding head space when I had recently separated from a long-term marriage. So I was in a marriage at a very young age, and I was married for 20 years. Wow. And so by the time that ended, I was at a point where I'm like, who am I as an individual outside of this relationship, because I'd pretty much grown up with this person. And so that started this real journey of understanding who was I as a person, as an individual woman who was doing all of the things. And that then started the process of learning, what does it mean to understand your identity, understand who you are, understand what your strengths are. And at the same time, I was doing this work in photography, and that kind of light bulb went, oh, hang on. There's a lot of women out there who've never had this process of actually going deep and understanding who they are. Because my story was a very typical story. That getting married young, having kids, having a career, doing all of the things that you are told to do, without really stopping and thinking about, who am I? And is this actually what I want to do? And then you'll get to this point in life, and I find a large percentage of my clients are probably late 30s and above, because they get to that stage in life where they go, hang on, what is going on? And so that journey personally really shaped my understanding of what personal branding is, coming from that really core sense of authenticity. And then as I've evolved my work over time and brought more of my HR experience and more of my HR stuff into it, has also really informed my position about leadership and how do you show up as a leader as well. And ironically, personal branding and leadership, there's a lot of overlap in those two things, because it is very much about how you step out into the world and share your opinions and share your expertise and thoughts and bring people with you on a journey. And so my experience individually about understanding who I was very much shaped how I do that. Yeah.
And this really bring out the why you do this.
Absolutely.
Yeah. This is just promoting other women who do not know who they are.
Absolutely.
They want to put themselves out there, and you found a tool to be able to support them to be able to do that. And I love that when I reflect through my journey as you're speaking as well. I think since I started my own business is when I actually started thinking more in depth. Like I think I've always gone, oh, this is who I am, blah, blah, blah. But then really, how do I show up?
Exactly.
To the world, do I like it? That this is the type of person that I am, but this is what I want to build, and this is who I am.
Exactly.
How do I merge the two to be able to? And that's a hard process.
It's not easy at all. And I think if I think about workplace statistics as well, is that one of the things that quickly leads you to burnout is when you've got to pretend. Do you know what I mean? If you're having to put on a front all the time, do you know what I mean? And it's if you go into the workplace and there's all of this rhetoric about you bring your whole self to work, and which most workplaces do not support that at all. So you're always in the workplace pretending to be somebody. Or if you feel like your Instagram feed or your personal brand has to look and be a certain way, you're always pretending to do that. And it is the quickest pathway to burnout, right? Because you are being so disingenuous and so not true to yourself that the ability to sustain that is just really eroded.
That is so interesting that you say that. With work, like you generally show up. It doesn't really matter necessarily about your personality, showing your work into your personality. It's like you're here, this is the task that we allocate you to do, and then you do it, you finish, you go home, and then you move up the chain. And then all of a sudden, then you have to think completely the opposite. You're like, how do I involve the work that I'm doing to who I am, and how do that bring impact?
Yeah. So it's, I think one of the biggest stories, I reckon, is that work, whether that's in the workplace or whether it's business, is neutral. It's not at all. How you show up to the workplace, the expectations of the workplace, and I say workplace, but I also mean business in that, because you're interacting with clients and you're interacting with stakeholders or whatever else. So how you interact and show up and work in that section, in that little space, whatever that is for you, is really influenced by who you are. And we have this expectation that, I just need to grind through, and I'm just going to do the thing, 1, 2, 3, and then work is done. But that's not how we operate a lot of times. Or we're putting on that front, like I was saying, to go, I need to do this and this, and if I don't, then I'm going to have a poor performance review, or I'm not going to sell this, rather than going, how do I shape it? Like you were mentioning before about how you've had to reflect, how can I do this in a way that works for me? And I think for me, my desire to go into business for myself was to very much build a space that I know that I can work in and thrive in. But a lot of folks don't have that. They've got to be able to work that. They've got to be able to work out how they can best thrive within the confines of an existing workplace. And that's really tough. That's really tough. And that's why over time my work has evolved again to come back a bit more to that workplace, so that we can create the environments where people can thrive. I know, it's like I say, it's twisting and it evolves, but it's all about the underpinning of it all is that we, and you know yourself, we do our best work when we are being our best selves. And if you're not in a space or a work environment where you can be your best self, then of course you're not going to do your best work. And when you've got the joy or the freedom, I say joy, anyone who runs their own business knows it's not always a joy. When you've got the joy of being able to do your own business, you've got the control to be able to make it the way that you want to. And my belief in leadership is to create workplaces that people can do that too.
I love that. I think there is a lot of fear in that as well, because if you are a person who hasn't necessarily always known how to promote you or yourself or put yourself forward, now all of a sudden you're like, I'm going to create it based on me. There's that fear that the way you're going to show up is not going to be approached, or there is that resistance of going, will people approve this? Will people like me? Will people like my idea? Is this normal? Who else has done this? Yeah. There is so many things that can stop you.
Absolutely.
From actually pursuing. And this is one of those internal conversations that doesn't even need to involve anybody else.
No, not at all.
Stop it.
And I think too, and this is one of the interesting pieces for me, and I'm going to do my best not to go on a tangent right now, but a lot of those internal dialogues are really shaped by the environments that we grow up in and the systems that we're operating in. There is that patriarchal system of what is the requirement of a woman to do in this world versus a man to do in this world. There is the very capitalist system that we operate in, which is what's going to make the most profit and what's going to do more for the less. We live in a very individualistic society. It's about grabbing and growing for me and mine and to hell with the rest of the world, but as long as my bank account is growing. And of course, and I talk about this a lot, also there's the racial discrimination systems, the racism that we operate in as well. So there's all of these layers of expectations or rules that we operate in, and we are constantly trying to navigate our way through those rules and systems. And I'm here telling you that the best way to do that is to be yourself, which at some times feels like the most ridiculous. Come on, woman, this
it's like I went to school and I went to uni, I did all the training, and nothing says be yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
And then
all of these rules tell me that I'm not supposed to do this. I'm a woman, I'm not supposed to be out here, or whatever the story is that we've taken on from all of the different places. So we are very much subject to all of these different types of conditioning. And they're almost like, I like to think of it in, it's going to sound really, you know how you have a crystal and you hang dangle the crystal in the sun and the light comes off it, right? And so it's really lovely, right? So if we can imagine that is our most authentic, true self, is that crystal. And when we're in the right spot, we sparkle. But dust gets on it, right? Or the sun goes behind the clouds. And no matter how much you're there trying to be yourself, when you've got all of these layers of things on top, you're not going to metaphorically shine the way that you can. And so it's about a process of not just putting yourselves in the right environment where there is sunshine, but also actively getting rid of, and we can't get rid of the systems that we live in. That's just part of where it is. But the more we become aware of them and the way that they're impacting us, the more we are removing the weight of those things from how we can show up. It's not a perfect system, but sometimes if we're going to be ourselves, we need to be ourselves.
Wow. That in itself builds resilience. And I am finding that often enough, we need to show up with resilience. We need to build up with resilience. And resilient does look differently for every single individual. How have you found that people can show their inner resilience through this?
I think life is tough, right? There's 100 different things and expectations being pulled on us all the time. To me, resilience comes from understanding who you are and why you're doing what you're doing. And so it comes back to the example that you gave before, as you progress, you're learning more about who you are and how you operate and trying to structure things the way that works best for you. Because if we just continually try to pretend and to shift our way and to fit in, it will wear us down because we're not operating from our best self. And again, that's not an easy thing to say, but once I've been able to identify, and when I say who we are, there's absolutely strengths and weaknesses in that. It's not saying that it's all rosy. It's going, I really struggle in circumstances where this is the case, and I'm going to really actively remove myself from those circumstances or those people or those relationships or whatever the thing is. I think the flip side to that is also understanding why you are doing what you're doing. And because if you're just showing up and doing stuff every day and that doesn't connect to that fundamental place of why within you, it's going to be like doing a chore rather than actually working towards something.
Yeah.
For me, the underpinning why for me is all about financial security for women. And which I know sounds a bit of a left field, but being able to show up as yourself and operate a business or climb the corporate ladder or do whatever it is that you want, you are able to gain financial security. And so when I think about any of the projects, any of the products, services, the various iterations of what my business has been, that has always been the case. It's been, what are the ways that I can support women to be financially independent? And that keeps me going. So when I'm having the really crappy days, or when I'm having the times when nothing seems to be going right, or I'm tired and I'm sick and whatever else, that's the memory that keeps me going. It's going, this is why I'm doing this, not because I want to be on Instagram, because it's not my favorite thing in the world, but this is why I'm doing it. And I know that in order to make this happen, these are the things that I need to do. And so for me, that resilience comes from knowing that why really deeply.
Yeah. Was it hard for you to find your why?
It has changed over the years, or rather, let me rephrase that. It took me a while to settle on it, but once it's settled, it's been pretty consistent for a good 10, 15 years.
Oh, wow.
But it took a long time for me to get to that point. And I think that's pretty normal.
Yeah.
And I think we have so many motivators in our life, or so many things that we want to achieve. There's going to be personal goals, there's going to be personal financial goals, health goals, all of the things, right? And that's all normal. But I personally feel that we are more connected for longevity and for greater good when we have a goal or a purpose that is outside of ourselves.
Yeah.
And that is for the community as a whole, whatever that looks like for you. And so I think for a long time I was spending my goals or my why or my purpose was about, I want to earn this much money so that I can do this, or I want to do whatever this particular activity is. And of course, as your life stages change, that's just going to change.
Yeah.
But when I started to go, hang on, I think this over here that keeps calling to me might be my bigger, stronger pull, that's when I started to find consistency in how I showed up.
Have you had issues with, and I think part of me do struggle with this, when you are building this thing, you are supporting other people, then you see other people progress, then you're like, when am I going to progress? But you are promoting them, and it's not out of jealousy, it's not nothing to do with that. I can see the growth, I can see the success that or the fruit that are coming out of this, but I don't see that myself. Can you speak on your experience on how you've dealt with it?
I have mini meltdowns regularly, and I think it's really important for us all to have a network of folks that we can tap into when those things happen and go, it's happening again, blah, blah, blah. And I absolutely do that. One of the things I've had to remind myself of is my timeline is going to be different from other people's timelines. Do you know what I mean? There are folks that came out into business full-time straight away. Of course, they're going to have a different trajectory than what I'm going to do. There are those who might be people who don't have kids or don't have other commitments. Their trajectory, their timeline is going to be different to mine. And I think if I go into that, if I go into those judgment moments filled with the it's not fair vibe, I can't think of any other reason other way to describe that. If I go into those interactions going, it's not fair, then I can quickly spiral into the it's not fair. But if I look at that situation and go, okay, I'm doing this and I'm doing this and I'm doing this and I progressed this far from last time, I've got this timeline that I'm working towards, all of a sudden it's that pulling back into my lane rather than looking at somebody else's. And I think a lot of times it's very easy to fall into the trap of watching other people's stories and highlight reels, as they say, without actually being too focused on your own and your own progress and your own progression, which I think is oftentimes much greater than what we give ourselves credit for.
Yeah, so true.
Oh my goodness, episode 1 has been watched and it's been aired, and oh my goodness, what was your thought? What was your biggest takeaway on that? How amazing is Renée? Like, just wealth of knowledge that we get to just listen to what she has to say, and all those I hope all the questions that I asked helped you to have a better understanding of when you are leading in this purpose-driven lifestyle as a leader. So thank you again so much for listening. Please make sure that you subscribe to our channel. Make sure you follow all our Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and also check out our merch on the website as well. We'll see you on our next episode in part 2 to finish off the whole series. Thank you again, and you have a blessed afternoon.